everyone, and welcome back to Girl Dad. I'm Abigail Frechette,
And I'm Peter Frechette
and we are recording late
on a Monday.
on a Monday. Um,
Abby is very busy now. Now that she's working, she
well,
is a lot
also,
of.
this week was a little different because one of my coworkers got sick, so usually I wouldn't work today. I wasn't scheduled. And then another one of my coworkers is home for the week, so it's just been a little chaotic.
That's
But
all right. Rake it in, baby.
an exception to the rule. Which is also so different because last week I only worked technically one day. So it's just that's also why I can take extra shifts because we get
And I am
hours.
back and forth between Cape Cod and Wellesley, Massachusetts.
Yes.
So I have limited limitations, shall we
Right.
say. So
But
glad we
that's
could
gonna
find
be
a time.
okay for our main topic because we're talking about something way old.
That's
So
right.
like
That's right. So
almost or no, actually as old as dad. It was like
okay. Good one.
um
But anyway,
but yeah, do you have anything for sports time? I don't have anything today.
well, the only thing I have is that, and hopefully by the time this comes out, it will have been reversed. But the Red Sox went on another winning streak. They won nine in a row, but now they've lost two in a row. So hopefully that will reverse itself again. And for if anybody is
Yeah.
watching on YouTube, if I'm glancing to the left, it's because we are recording at night and there's a baseball game
Or if you're listening and he's not
and
jumping in,
responding. That's true.
it could be that as well. Um, I heard something today. I was listening to my Red Sox podcast that I listened to, and they were talking about how since they've started playing well, they've kind of been playing at the level of the teams they're playing at a little bit. Like, I don't know how to explain.
Yeah,
Never
yeah,
mind. You know what I mean?
they're playing up against the division leaders and they're playing down against the teams that
Yes.
are struggling. Like they just lost
Yes.
two out of three to the A's, who
Which
are not
who
good.
are like homeless right now, by the way,
That's
too. So
true.
it's
These
like
Sacramento A's.
it's been going on. But yeah, so that was something interesting I thought I'd share.
That was good. That was
But
good.
that's it for sports time today. Do you have any not breaking news?
No, president falls asleep, whatever.
Yeah,
That's not breaking news.
yeah. Um, I don't have any either.
Okay,
Oh,
let's
I
get to the
actually,
next. Oh,
no, really
oh,
quick, I do
oh,
have something
oh.
because this is something I just learned about because I'm not really that online right now anymore. But this is something that I heard about over the weekend. So by the time you guys hear this, this is like really not breaking. But did you see AOC is made an announcement that she's freezing her eggs? And I think it's great that she's talking about this. I know she doesn't talk about her personal life a lot, but I think it is helpful, especially with the way women's bodies are politicized, especially around birth and things related to that, that it's cool that she's talking about her personal experience with this. I also think on the other opposing side, a lot of Republican women talk about them being mothers and how like that's a selling point for them being in office. So like why can't she talk about that she's going through this and anyways, but just like leave her alone about it a little bit. Like people are being really weird about it and we just don't need to be weird about it.
Shocking.
I know, but I don't know. That was something I wanted to just don't be weird about it. Let people do what they
Okay.
want to do.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this is the first episode in a series that we're going to start where we're going to be talking about all of the decades that dad has lived through. Um,
All of them?
yeah, I think so.
Oh boy.
Well, not like the current decade, so
Oh, okay.
I guess up until 2010s.
Okay. All right. I thought you
Yeah,
were talking
makes
about
sense.
going all the way to now, and I'm like, no,
Well,
thank you.
no, because that's why we did. So we kind of teased this in the 2016 episode we did,
Yeah.
um, with the like 10 years since 2016. So I mean, there'll be some overlap with that when we get there,
Yeah,
long time
I
from
hear you.
now.
Yeah, well,
But
weeks and weeks.
yeah, it's not that long,
Better than
actually. It's only
years.
6 episodes. But anyways, so we're kind of going to talk about, so today we're starting off with the 1960s. Dad was conveniently born in
1960.
1960,
That's
which
right.
is really easy for all of us to remember his age by.
That's right. It's very convenient for me
Very,
too.
yeah, I'm sure. But so with the 60s, they are known as the counterculture decade. There were a lot of revolutions in social norms, religion, morality, law and order, clothing, music, drugs, dress, sexuality, formalities, civil rights, percepts of military duty, and schooling. So we're gonna get into some of the events around that. And I mean, Dad was, 0 to 10 during
Yeah.
this one. So
Maybe
he's
maybe we should have brought in a guest for this
well,
one.
well, he's gonna jump in, but as we go on, he will have more personal anecdotes to
We
include
hope.
within
I
these.
haven't forgotten it all by then.
But yeah, so we're gonna start off talking about how the decade started, then kind of my theory that the decades actually follow trends on the fives, not the zeros, and kind of get into where we see that happening in the 60s. Um, but yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go through some stuff, pop in when you have thoughts, feelings, or anecdotes.
Okay.
But yeah.
There's not
So
a lot I remember from, I mean, I remember growing up, but I don't remember a lot of sort of global things. So, uh,
yeah. I
I'll do
mean,
the
some
best
of
I
this
can.
stuff also we've talked about, like the
Sure.
moon landing happened in the 60s.
Yeah.
So, some of
Yeah.
this we're gonna have like little things. So yeah,
I'll
but
probably be repeating stories that I've told before, but
which
nobody listens to every
context.
episode.
Mom doesn't.
Uh,
Anyways, okay,
and I'm sorry
so
if I've insulted you because you have listened to every episode. Please let me know at
yeah.
girldadpcast@gmail.com and let us
Um,
know that no, yes, indeed, you have listened to every episode. Fact
all
check.
right. Also, if you have any fun stories from the 60s, maybe we'll like share them at the beginning of the next episode to
Yes, that's
lead us
right.
into the
Or if you have
70s.
something about the 70s that you want us to talk about
Yeah.
next
Yeah,
week,
yeah,
let us know.
all right. So the 60s started with a post-war economic boom that was happening during the 50s. So more people, like the important thing I think about all of this is that more people have televisions and radios in their homes. There's kind of more money for not necessarily like relaxing leisure, but like entertainment leisure, I think is more the way I would put it in this context. Which is important when we look at how that formed the decade. Um,
Well, you talk about, I don't know, you want me to jump in whenever, so
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going
yeah,
to
please
jump
do.
in whenever. And you mentioned television, and I I'm not speaking on this from memory. I'm speaking on this from just learning, and
Hmm.
that's television was a huge factor in 1960 in the presidential election,
Exactly. Yeah.
and because JFK was so much more telegenic than Richard Nixon,
Yeah.
and Nixon really overcame that later somehow. I don't think he did, but maybe.
We'll get into him. But yeah, so I think that's kind of something, just a nice way to set up the decade. Also, an interesting fact I learned about this decade, which I didn't realize, is that 42 countries gained independence from their European colonial rulers during the 60s, which is a lot.
It is a lot.
And I think it's also, in certain ways, like one of those things where I know these things happened in the years they happened, but I don't always know that they happened at the same time as other events. Like I don't put them together in my brain. Um,
That's
so that's
also that leads me to something that I feel like people don't think things can change because they are the way they are.
right.
But when you actually look back, yeah, there have been times when there has been dramatic change.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so anyway,
Yeah,
just
no, I
throwing that
think
out
that's
there.
really important. Also in the beginning of the 60s, we kind of get this forming of the Cold War. So the Berlin Wall is built in 1961, and the Cuban Missile Crisis happens in 1962. Um, we also have JFK's assassination in 1963. I'm kind of gonna move through the early 60s a little quicker because, like I said, I want to get to
Well, then,
the
because when you get to the middle 60s, then you get high and you just kind of
exactly, and that's gonna be much slower,
yeah,
Abby.
yeah.
Um, but because I think that these are kind of the events that maybe set up the
Sure.
actual vision we have of the 60s in our head. But if you look at those earlier years, those things hadn't happened yet. They were being like pre-planned a little bit, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So also in 1963, we get The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, which is one of the like early second wave feminism texts of the time. And I also want to note that the introduction of birth control pills happened in 1960. So you already kind of see these early signs of a feminist movement building. Um, in terms of kind of entertainment and music, pop culture, we start to see a folk music revival in the 60s, so like Bob Dylan. We also have the Beatles breaking America in 1964. So that's a new form of music for us.
Um, Folk music revival.
Yes.
So
I
it had
also,
gone away and came back.
yes. So that was something, again, in my research. I didn't realize there was like the initial folk music period was pre World Wars, and then
Ah,
it kind of disappeared
okay.
and then came back with like the Joan Baez, the
Yeah.
Newport Folk
Uh,
Festival, that kind of idea of it. But
Which became very
obviously,
protesty as well.
yes, and very because folk music was always writing about like I mean, we talked about folk music. We did a whole episode on that. You can go listen to it. I don't need to get into all of it. But yeah, it became kind of as it started in the 60s, it was, this kind of original version of folk music, but then it moves along with the times as well and becomes more of like this protest music that we maybe think of as like the founding of folk music, but is not.
Okay.
Um so we also get the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Um, Selma to Montgomery marches happened in 1965 for the National Voting Rights Act. Um, and then I feel like this is like one of those very small moments that indicates large change. Dylan goes electric in 1965. Now I know that sounds like really cheesy. There's so many other things that are like more important moments maybe that are happening in 1965, but I do think that there's something in there that like is an indicator of change and people being like we gotta do something different. Like this isn't working.
We
And you have
gotta get
these
out of this place.
you see these kind of signs in the early 60s of like we have certain civil rights movements happening with like MLK, and then we have certain like whispers of feminism kind of approaching the mainstream, but we don't have these full blown movements happening kind of nationwide yet, but they are still important at that time. I don't want to like take anything away from that. Um, so there's a couple things that happen. One thing I want to start with. Let's start with the hippie movement. So this is the birth of the hippie is actually in the 60s. I think a lot of people associate the hippies with the 70s, but I think
I
they
do
are
not.
created. Okay. Well,
Well, one
I
thing,
think
I mean,
like if you go to like a 1970s party, you would dress as a hippie. If you go to like a 1960s party, you might go more like mod.
but I think one of the things that I think of when I think about the hippie movement per
Yeah.
se, actually to me came with the Beatles, which was the hair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the hair was a protest.
Well, I think that's the thing is like through a younger and like today lens, I think we see hippie as like a drugged out kind of like peace and love, man. Like, the aesthetic is there, but I don't think people always think about what the original hippie movement really stood for, because I think that was much more about the protesting and much less about the aesthetic, unless the aesthetic was to protest something, right? So some of the things that the hippies really stood for, I guess, was this like liberation in society. So the sexual revolution was a big part of that, this kind of questioning of authority and government, and demanding more freedoms for rights and rights for women and minorities. So again, like the sexual revolution stuff goes very hand in hand with feminism stuff at the time. um, I think like the mini skirt is kind of really good as an emblem of what feminism looked like at the time, as like a mini skirt is a form of protest because like I'm choosing to sexualize myself, but it's my choice as a woman to do that. So therefore I have power. You can argue with that if you want, but that was at the time the way they were looking at things. Another thing that becomes like really popular is this within the hippie movement is this concept of the underground press. So this is not it's not a newspaper. The underground press is a like mass of various news sources that are moving through like zines you see a lot coming through. There's a long history of queer people writing news in certain books to each other and leaving them either in libraries or at the bookstore so you get
Really?
like information from each other. Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is like a really cool thing. They also sometimes would leave like love notes to each other in those too. So like that was a very large way of conveying messages to each other and kind of like presenting each other with information that might be useful to each other. Kind of like gossip in a more vital way a little bit, where it's like you got to keep it on the down low that we're talking about these things, but we need to get it out there. Lots of kind of mailers. So yeah, things like that. And then on the more kind of political side of this, so like in the, shall we say, like I don't know, like appropriate society version of like the hippie was this concept of the new left. So today we would probably look at that as like a liberal, not like a super progressive leftist, but definitely on the more progressive side of the left right now. And so this is like, again, kind of questioning the way things have always been, wanting equal rights for women and other minorities. All those kinds of things that like the hippies stand for, but in a more politics way, I guess is
Yeah.
the right way of putting it.
And
Um,
eventually it worked for a while.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think so I mean, going into a little bit kind of the what was happening maybe in the more like pop culture side of this, um, you start to have, or just like societal norms changing. You have the first time that LSD and marijuana are widespread and kind of socially acceptable drugs to use. Um, you have this beginning of the new Hollywood era, so we're kind of leaving the like golden age of cinema and entering into this newfound thing. I will say still though, like The Sound of Music was the highest grossing film at the time. You also start to have, more color TVs, films in color, all that kind of like technological advances. Um, while you're still having like the the remnants of like the old studio system, but some of that stuff is starting to break down a little bit more. The same way, like, it's all kind of going back to this idea, like you said at the beginning, of like, this is the way things have always been. And oh, wait, they don't have to be that way. So let's fight them so we can change them. And that's kind of, I would say, especially like the late 60s, kind of where society was.
Well, I just looked up because you reminded me of something from the pop culture time period, and I was wondering if a particular movie came out during that time, and it did in 1967, The Graduate.
Yes.
And that had some excellent messaging in it as far
Yeah.
as sort of counterculture
Yeah,
and
definitely.
great movie.
I mean, I
Anyway,
would say probably 67 onward, you're gonna get a lot of the films and TV shows featuring more of like hippie politics, hippie movement stuff. Um, Again, it kind of happened where you get certain things in like 65, 66 that are starting to go that direction, kind of like the way the feminine mystique came out earlier in the 60s, but the feminist movement really didn't kick off until the later 60s, right? So again, you kind of have that thing happening with art as well. So like cinema is a big example. And then you have, of course, like the breaking down of certain ideas about like the Hays Code and like what is okay to show in films.
what's the
Um,
Hays Code?
Oh, wow. Have we never talked about the Hays Code before? So the Hays Code was a kind of creation, I believe, by the like the moral majority type
Okay,
people,
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of. It definitely had stuff to do with like religious people, like Christians. And it was a quote unquote set of moral self-censorship guidelines for US cinema. So it was basically this stuff that like
So it's the precursor to the G and PG and all that stuff.
I think that stuff existed prior, but this was more like you can't even make movies with any of like what we would now probably consider like PG-13 in it. So it started in the 30s and it ended, I want to say, in like 68. And it was named after this guy, Will H. Hayes, who like sucked. I don't know. Yeah, so that's probably a bad way
I
of
had
saying
nothing
it.
else to say about him.
He was a politician, but he was also the president of like like the I think he was the president of who, because it used to be different, right? Where the cinemas and the studios were owned by like the studios owned the movie theaters and stuff. So like what you would show in different, so that used to be different. So it would be, he was like the president of who decided like what would be distributed right where. And
Okay.
so that's why the code started, was he could say basically, oh, well, that has swear words, or it has sex in it, or it has sympathy for criminals was like a big one. So when that
Oh,
changed, you started getting these kind of anti-hero characters. That's why if you really watch movies that were made before the late 60s, you're not going to see any kind of like
heroic
redemption
gangsters.
arc for yeah. Um and it kind of, I mean, that's why people call it like the golden age of Hollywood, was like those earlier films. Um, there there was also a lot of stuff about like, homosexuality was very much off the table. Or in later times, while this still existed and past its existence, um, if there was any kind of like queer adjacent character, because you could not say that a character was explicitly queer, but you could, there's they had
Yeah,
symbols and ways of doing it. So like if you could, that character could not have a happy ending. So like in a lot of these movies that character would die, or just, I mean, die is the most common one. Sometimes they'd go to prison. They wouldn't go to prison for being gay, or they wouldn't die from being gay or queer, but they would
die.
die from something else, but it was clear that you were signaling the audience in a certain way. Um okay. So that's kind of what's going on in Hollywood. However, in
Can I
the
just,
yeah,
something's missing from your little outline here, I think.
okay.
The Vietnam War.
It's in there somewhere. I know I added it. Oh, did I
Oh,
not?
it's on page 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, it's in there. I know
Sorry.
it's yeah.
Sorry. Because I mean it started before that, so
Yes.
that's fine.
I think that's
Okay.
like we're gonna
Sorry.
get there.
Sorry.
So the well, actually let's talk about that now, because then we'll get into Nixon. Um so part of the kind of the way the hippie movement was able to grow a lot beyond all of these things that we've talked about was the anti-Vietnam War sentiment. So people were having enough of kind of standing by and no one listening to them. And I think there's kind of this thing that happens, I would say, starting in the 50s, but becomes more again like mainstream in the 60s, where people are paying attention in a different way and also have more access to information. So I think that's again kind of these like underground press. They're like writing articles explaining to maybe everyday citizens what is actually happening with the Vietnam War. Like, why is this actually going on? And I think that was something that maybe in the past, with, let's say, like the Korean War, wasn't as prominent. Like, there was protests against that, but it wasn't as vocal, because not everyone understood why the war was happening, if that makes sense.
I still don't.
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, neither of these wars make any sense, should not have happened. Um, but I think that's kind of the it's a little bit of a genesis for like why this movement gained so much traction, especially around youth and like a certain age of young men. Because if you think about it, it's like, unfortunately, you have to, in movements like this, a lot of the time that are trying to get equal rights for other people, you have to somehow include white men in there. And not wanting to go to war is a really great way to do that with like 20 something year old white men. I mean, now the way they're doing that is you'll never be able to buy a home and you're like a white man. So, it's like a different thing now, but it's the same kind of thing. You have to bring these people into the movement. And at this time, that was the way to do it. And then introduce them to all of these concepts. But I think that's why the larger hippie movement was kind of able to grow in that way, was because of this dissent and this kind of need and want to be more aggressive with your protesting and not kind of just like standing by and being like, this sucks, we don't want to do this. It was like, we're taking to the streets, we're being as vocal as possible, we're doing strikes, we're doing sit-ins, like we're being, I don't mean like violent aggressive, of course that did happen, but I just mean more diligent maybe. But yeah, I guess, I don't know, aggressive feels like the right way to say it, like we're not letting up, kind of, right? um but yeah, so that is all happening along with a which this fact was crazy to me. So in the late 1960s, the crime rate doubles and has never returned to the level of the early 1960s. Two, I think, big things that happen around this time, which are also highly publicized, are going to be the Manson murders and the Zodiac killer. So the Zodiac killer is kind of one of the not a lot of people think like that's the first serial killer in America. That's not
Huh.
true, but it is true that it's the first one to be like the most prominent. Kind of a comparison you could make is it's similar to like the way true crime is talked about now with like the OJ Simpson case, where obviously OJ Simpson was not the first man to murder his ex-wife, but
OJ murdered his ex-wife?
whoa,
Wait a
sorry,
minute, breaking
allegedly,
news.
allegedly. But it's kind of like the first televised court case, this
Right.
like whole. So I think like the Zodiac killer's the first version of like that first serial killer. So a lot of people are like, oh, he's the first serial killer. It's like, no. I think another part of this fact, which is important to acknowledge, is also that when you have social changes, you're going to have both people who don't like those changes and act out in negative ways that are criminal. And then you're also going to have like new kind of crimes in a way. Like they're not things that are like we wouldn't call them new moral crimes, but you're going to have them kind of be new crimes in the sense that they're like being reported more and they're being taken more seriously. I think an example, like a more modern day example of this would be kind of like the Me Too movement, where you see like the sexual assault crime rate rise around that time. But it's not because there's more of that crime taking place. It's because more people who have that had that crime done to them are reporting it, and therefore action is more likely to be taken against it. So I think that's also something to keep in mind when you think about, whoa, the crime rate doubled, but it didn't actually double for necessarily the bad reasons. It probably part of that is like good reasons of
People reported
people,
it.
yeah, like people getting in trouble for the crimes they've always committed, kind
Yeah.
of. Um, but all of these things put together set up a very easy atmosphere for a law and order president.
Too,
So
too bad we didn't get one.
in 1968, Richard Nixon is elected. Um, I would call this the birth of modern fear politics, not necessarily, again, like the birth of fear politics, but I think he and his conglomerate, shall we say, added a new level of this to society. He also had the silent majority, and like I said before, it was this law and order presidency. So those things kind of all go hand in hand to put him in this place of I'm going to clean up the streets. So I'm going to take care of these things that you should be afraid of, and I'm going to villainize them even more than you think they're bad. I'm going to make them seem even worse than they are so that you think I'm even better than I am. I do want to note the Watergate scandal that happens later. We'll talk about that next
70s.
episode. um, but I do think that is, you know, we got to note it, right?
Yeah.
This one, setting that up. Um, so a couple other things that happened. This one I think I kind of put in the wrong order here, so very sorry. But the first ever Super Bowl does happen in the 60s in 1967 in Los Angeles, California.
Yes. Green Bay
Um,
Packers.
Great, didn't know that, so thank you for
Green Bay
see
Packers
you're
won the
adding.
first two Super Bowls as the
Okay.
NFL representative. And people started to think that because I believe we've talked about this before, but the AFL and the
Yeah, we
NFL
have.
merged, and so the Super Bowl was basically between the old AFL and the NFL.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the Packers won the first two, so everyone was like, ah, the AFL is no good, the NFL is much better.
Yes.
And then in 1969, still in the 60s, the New York Jets beat the Baltimore Colts, and what was supposed to be the greatest upset of all time, with Joe Namath guaranteeing a victory and then winning it as the quarterback of the Jets and making the AFL, putting them on equal footing with the NFL, and the rest is history. And by the way, how many guys have guaranteed winning a game and then not won and nobody says anything about it? Nobody goes, "You promised."
Yeah.
But if you guarantee it and you do it, well, then you're a hero.
Then you're a hero.
Anyway,
So going into kind of the last year of the 60s, we've got Woodstock, we've got the Stonewall riots, and we have the moon landing. And I think that these are all
cool.
very great, awesome things to have happened. But I think they're all, to me, indications of how this isn't the end of these trends. This is the middle point because Woodstock, I think, is an example of it's the peak of folk music and rock music kind of becoming one and fusing and adding this psychedelic aspect to it, which I think is what continues into the 70s. And then I think the Stonewall riots, again, is this indication of people having enough and doing something more extreme that's been building in the late 60s and will continue to be built upon in the early 70s. And then I kind of think the moon landing, in a way, is another indication of that, of like, I think some people look at it as like, well, obviously there's this aspect of you got the thing done that like JFK said he wanted done and he did it and that's great because obviously he was killed and yeah, no. But I also think it can be kind of seen as this like America is still successful and that goes into like on a world scale and that's still brought into the early 70s as well. Um so again, I've kind of talked throughout this about this division that happened, I would say around the mid 60s, 1965. We're getting more feminist movements turning into more sexual revolution. We're turning journalism more aggressive and this distrust in the government is coming through. But then we also have Nixon who comes in and says, "Wait a second, I can stop this. I will stop the youths from doing these bad naughty things." Which
Utes.
the youths. I love that word. The youths. Anyways, so that's kind of my thoughts and feelings on the 1960s as an outsider, I guess. But I think that kind of sets us up for next week when we're going to go into the 70s. Is there anything else you kind of want to add here at the end, Dad, before we
Well,
even move
I
on?
mean, the thing that I talked about the most was the Super Bowl, and I
Yeah.
should mention that in 1967, the Red Sox won the pennant, and for the first time in 20 years, almost 20 years, I think. So, and gave a rebirth to Boston sports, to Boston baseball that I think exists to this day.
Hmm.
And so that was exciting for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll try to do a few more sports things because I didn't do a lot
no,
of.
that's fine.
Because I don't know, I guess like culturally, it does seem like, again, something the youths were not as interested in. Like their entertainment seemed to be a bit more artistic because they wanted these like messaging things, I guess. Like
Yeah,
I'm not saying sports weren't important culturally, generally speaking, but I guess just like within the kind of hippie movement culture, it's like they
well,
wanted their
I
music, they
I I
wanted their cinema.
I, I think that and I you make a note of this one for next week.
Okay.
That one of the reasons that you see so much more interest in sports now than you feel like there was then is the evolution of television and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ESPN starting in
You can watch it all.
1978. So
Yeah.
now you can watch everything. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about ESPN next week because I have great
We
thoughts about
absolutely
that.
will.
That I remember. Uh,
Okay, awesome. I do also just want to mention, so I did some research for this, but I
you
also
did a lot of research for this. It's very impressive.
thank you. Obviously these are the things that I wanted to pick out as things to talk about. There's also so much more. And if you are interested in like this as a concept of looking back at the decades, I will say that CNN did a great they've done like a couple series on the decades that are like kind of docu series and they go through all these kinds of things we're talking about. They talk about the evolution of television primarily through the 60s to I think they go up to the 90s. Um and I think Tom Hanks is maybe a producer on
Oh,
them.
very much so. And
Yeah, and they get a lot of interviews, things from that time, but that would be definitely something
I
if
actually
you're
think they're
into
doing
this to recommend.
I think they're doing sports of the decades right now.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, because I mean, I think it's primarily TV, but they definitely talk about, all the culture things that are happening
Yeah.
that indicate what the television shows being made were. But that's what we've got for you this week. Do you have a smile of the week, Dad? I don't have one this week,
You know, it's
unfortunately.
it's so recent that we last did this. I
I
haven't smiled a
know.
lot since then. So no,
I will say I did smile this morning because this is the first day that I left the train station and was not immediately hit by like guttural humidity. I don't
that's
even know if
good.
you can use guttural to describe humidity, but I did.
Clearly, you can.
Yeah, why not?
I'm
Um,
I'm sure that I've had some smiles. But
that'll be
yeah, I don't
okay.
even know what I
We'll
did
get
this
to it
weekend.
next
So
week.
next
You
week,
can
yeah,
do
we'll double
two.
up
You
next
can
week.
do
We'll have a
two
lot more to
next
go
week.
because we'll record later.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, guys. Well, we will talk to you then. Like we said before, you can email us girldadpcast@gmail.com if you have anything about the 70s or the 60s that we want to touch on next week. Let us know. But this was really great. Thank you guys for listening. We will talk to you next week. Bye, Dad.
bye, girl. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed the episode, follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, rate us, and leave a review.